Welcome back to Huawei Routing and Switching Elite Training for HCIE. Today topic we are going to discuss on ISIS. Let's start our part 9.
It's time for us to look into ISIS troubleshooting. Okay, so in this topology, we will have a bit of problem. Alright, so let's look into a troubleshooting over here. So after ISIS run on the network, R1 and R2 cannot ping each other network segment. How to rectify this fault? So this is a very simple network. Okay, so R1 and R2 having a network of 10 on the left hand side, and on R2 I have a 172 network on the right hand side. Now the best practice for you to troubleshoot, okay, and this is the flow. So check whether ISIS is enabled on the related interfaces. Okay, so remember that we don't use a network statement, we have to use ISIS enable. So you can do a let me go back to my configuration over here. As you can see that you can do a display ISIS interface, okay, to check which interfaces you have enabled. So next, check whether the basic configuration is correct. Okay, so you can do a display ISIS display CCISIS to make sure that the configuration is correct. So check whether the interface level are correctly configured. You notice that we can configure our circuit on the ISIS level, ISIS configuration, or we can also go to the interface there and change our circuit level to different level. So make sure that L1 to L1, L2 to L2, or L1 L2. Okay, so next is to check whether the router are in the same area. So very importantly is that you check on the network entity. Okay, so if the network entity is different, then you have to use the L2 instead of L1. Check whether the IP address of the neighboring interface are using the same subnet. Okay, so the ISIS will check on the subnet. If the subnet is not the matching subnet, it will not form. Check whether the system ID of the router are the same. Okay, check whether the authentication is enabled and whether the authentication configuration is correct. So make sure that you are using both the correct authentication type, like for example MD5 or plain, and make sure that the password is case sensitive, the password is correct. And finally, check whether the interface sends the standard hello packet. Alright, so you can make sure that you can do a display ISIS followed by the interface followed by the web browser. Okay, so make sure that these are correct. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong in ISIS, but if you can follow the methodology here, the troubleshooting flow here, so hopefully that troubleshooting ISIS will be less painful. Now let's look into the case study on the ISIS. So we have company B, alright, with the new topology. So we have R1, R2, and R3. So R1 connect to R2 using serial, R2 to R3 serial, and R1 to R3 is using Ethernet. Okay, so let's look into the requirement. There are 3 requirements here. So first is to configure R1, R2, and R3 as level 2. Okay, R1 to 1, 2, 3, or level 2. Okay, add R1 and R2 to area 47001 and add R3 to 47002. So in another word, we are going to configure the R1 and R2 using one area and the R3 using another area. Okay, so this area we are going to have let's see, 470002. Okay, whereas R1 and R2 for this area we are going to use a 470001. Okay, so let's look into the configuration later on. So it's very simple. So just use a ISIS and network entity, but remember that they want us to use using the level 2. Okay, so level 2 here. So for you to do this, you just need to use the IS level 2. Okay, now second requirement is to ensure that no DIS exists between R1 R3. Now if you look into topology, R1 R3 is using Ethernet, and that will be using a broadcast. So since they do not need to use the requirement is do not allow to use DIS, then the solution for us to do is to enable point to point. Okay, And on top of that, it said that use a reliable mechanism to establish neighbor relationship between intermediate system. And for us to do that, we need to use what we call the three-way negotiation on the three-way. Because by default, if let's say you are using the ISIS, they are going to use a two-way negotiation. So this requirement is to test you on whether you understand that the ISIS point-to-point, there is two negotiation. Default is using two-way, and the reliable mechanism is using three-way. And finally, the requirement is do not run ISIS on interface gate 001. So gate 001 is attached to this network, but ensure ISIS area can access the network segment on which gate 001 is located. Do not use ACL and IP prefix. And for you to do that, we have to use what we call the import route. Okay, so let's look into the solution. Okay, so I have here my topology. Based on the requirement is that the requirement for the first is to have R1, R2 as the 47001 and R3 as 47002. Okay, so let's do it now. So I'm going to have this guy running on 47001, and I have another one here. Okay, that's running on 47002. So let me put it nicely so you can see properly. So this is 01 and this is 47002. Okay, so let's do the configuration. Now the first one here is that we are going to configure the ISIs, and remember that the requirement is that we have to use a level 2. So 1, 2 and 3 all using level 2, so that's very simple. So let's do a system view ISIs. So we are going to use the IS level 2. Okay, so our network entity for this guy is 47.0001. Okay, so followed by the system. So since this is a router 1, I'm going to use 01. Okay, there you go. And I'm going to enable that on both the serial interface as well as the gig interface. So I need to go to the interface 0100 ISIS enable, and the gig 00 ISIS enable. That's it. Okay, so let me do a display CC ISIS. So this is to verify the ISIS has enabled with the level 2 followed by the network entity. So I'm going to do it on router 2 now using the same method ISIS level level 2 network entity 47.0001.000. Okay, then I do it on the serial 100. Okay, ISIS enable, and in the serial 101 ISIS enable. Okay, so we have enabled on the both the router 1 as well as the router 2. Alright, as you can see that is up already. So final one, we are going to do the router 3. Now router 3, we are going to use a 47002 instead of 47001. So ISIS. Okay, so again, the requirement is to use a level 2. Okay, the network entity is 47.0002. Okay, that's my system ID. And in my gig 00 ISIS enable, interface serial 01 ISIS enable. There you go. Okay, so when I do a display ISIS peer, alright, you should have both gig 00 and serial 101. Okay, alright, so we have the L2 form and it's up. Alright, so if let's say we look into the second requirement, the second requirement is to ensure that no DRS exists between R1 and R3 and use a reliable mechanism. So as I mentioned that we are going to use the point-to-point as well as we are going to use the reliable using three-way handshaking. Okay, So the first thing is that between R1 and R3. So let's go into the R1 here. In the R1 interface gate 000, first I'm going to use a command called ISIS circuit type. Okay, by default here is using the broadcast. I'm going to use a point-to-point. Okay, that's the first thing. As you can see that I changed it already. And second, we are going to use a ISIS PPP negotiate. So we have three-way. Okay, three-way only. Now this is important because that's what's required by the question. So this is the gig 00 on router 1. Let me copy this. I go to router 3. In the interface gate 00 here, I'm going to do the same thing. First, I change to point-to-point, and second, I change into three-way only. Alright, so we have fulfilled the requirement on the second one, but at the meantime, remember that the question asks for all of the router need to use the reliable mechanism. So we have to fulfill the requirement. So on the router 2, we also need to do the same thing. So in the router 2 interface 0101, we are going to use ISIS PPP negotiation three-way only. Okay, that's on the facing the R3, and S00, we also will do the same thing, followed by router 1, that's in the serial 100, ISIS PPP negotiate three-way only. There you go. Okay, so we have fulfilled the second requirement. Okay, let's look into the third requirement. It said that do not run ISIS on gig 001 of R1, but ensure that the ISIS area can access the network segment on which gig 001 is located. Do not use ACL or IP prefix. So for this, we are going to use the import route. Okay. Okay, so let's go into R1. Let me do a checking on the gig 001. Sorry, in display IP interface gig 001. So this is my IP address. Let me go to gig 001 on router 1. Okay. Alright, seems that the gig 001 have no IP. Alright, so as you can see that, let me give it an IP. Okay, 10.0.0.1. Okay. Display IP interface brief. Just now is not configure any IP. Now the requirement over here is to say that do not run ISIS. So I cannot use ISIS enable. But you have to advertise this without using ACL and IP prefix. So the only way for us to do that is to use the import route. So here in the R1, as you can see that ISIS is not enabled on this interface. And for us to do that, I just go to ISIS. Okay, and I need to do an import route. Now if I'm going to do an import route direct, then you will have a problem because I may have others interfaces also be imported. Now based on the requirement is that I only need to use gig 001. So if I'm going to press enter in this case, then you have a problem. So I need to create a route policy. So let me abort this. Okay, let me abort this and sorry, undo import route direct. Okay, I need to create a policy here. So route policy 10 permit node 10. I'm going to match the interface of gig 001. So only gig 001 will be imported. So I go back to ISIS. Then I'm going to say that import route direct. Okay, based on the policy, my policy just now is called 10. Right, enter. So display CCISIS. Okay, so that is the policy, and let me check my policy. Display route policy. So you can see it's matched. And if I go to router 3 and see whether I can see the route, display IP routing table protocol ISIS. Okay, so I do have the route here, and let me do a 10.0.0.1 ping. There you go. So I have just fulfilled all the requirement on the case number 1. Let's look into case number 2 for this ISIS lab. So we have company C running ISIS. The following figure show the network topology. So I have 1, 2, 3, and 4 are connected through the gigabit Ethernet, right, in a diamond shape. So the first one is not a requirement. It just mentioned that retain the existing configuration and add any necessary configuration. Alright, so we should have all the configuration given to us. So this is a topology, and if let's say we go to R1 where we do a display CCISIS, so the requirement is that do not touch the existing configuration. Display ISIS pure. The peering is also up. Alright, so if we go back into the requirement, configure R1 to access 172.16.0.0/24 through R2. Do not use ACL, prefix list routing policy, or maximum load balancing. So 172 is on the right side attached to R4. So if we go back into topology and have a look, okay, on R1, let's do a display IP routing protocol, ISIS. And sure enough, you can see that 172 is on this part on R4, and they are doing load balancing. Now, according to the requirement, it said that we have to configure R1 so that when we access to 172, it have to be on R2, but we cannot use all the generic method. So we have to use a ISIS method. And so what you think about the ISIS method that is unique only for ISIS? Alright, you cannot use ACL, prefix, routing policy, or maximum load. Now, one of the command that is unique to ISIS is called next hop. Alright, and we also can configure the waiting. Alright, let's look into the solution on how to do that. So I go back to router 1. So this is before the configuration. So once we have configured, we should be able to see only 12.112, which is on R2. And the command that is unique is called next hop 12.1.1.2, and we can select the weight. Okay, so the weight is from 1 to 254. 1 will good enough. So let's do a display IP routing protocol ISIS. Okay, so you can see that now they're only using router 2. Instead of earlier on, we are using both router 2 and router 3. Okay, so we already solved this first issue. Now the second here we are going to look into is ensure that ISIS log can be viewed in the real time. So for you to do that, you just do a log peer change, okay, under the ISIS configuration. And second requirement is to configure R1 to aggregate 10.0x0/24 to 10.0.0/22, avoid network loop. So we know that this is actually a level 2, and we are going to do some summarization. So let's do it. So we are going to go to R1 again. So the first requirement is to make sure that the log can be viewed in real time. And we have 4 routers running ISIS, so we have to enable all the 4. Okay, and the command is called log peer change. Okay, so what you need to do is just do a log peer change on all the routers. So I just do a copy here, okay, and paste. So it will be the same throughout the routers. Okay, that's it. So let's go back and do the summarization. So based on the interface gig 00 here, I have the 10 network. Okay, these are the 10 network. If let's say I go to router 2 do a display IP routing table protocol ISIS. So you can see that this is before the summarization. So I need to summarize it. Okay, so I'm going to summarize it. Instead of 24, I'm going to summarize based on /22. And there's also a requirement to make sure that loopback should be avoided. Okay, the network loop should be avoided. So let me go back to router 1. I need to go to ISIS, and the command for you to do summary is called summary. So first I'm going to summary based on 22. So it's 255.255.252.0. So this is a level 2 ISIS. Okay, so I'm going to do a generate now 0 route, and we are going to use a void feedback. Okay, so let me do a display this. So this is a command for you to meet the requirement. Okay, so when I go into the router 2 and I do one more time, on the routing table you can see that now it's /22. So that's it. So we have fulfilled the requirement of point number 2 and point number 3. Okay, so in this video I have shown you the principle, the configuration, the troubleshooting on some of the requirement and 2 cases. Okay, and finally the exam preparation. So do practice on your ISIS command. Alright, so remember that we have to familiarize with the ISIS policy configuration. You have to know how to peer and what is the relationship with the different network type, including point-to-point as well as the broadcast network. Okay, do practice on reading and search the headaches document. Alright, because during the exam, headaches is your best friend. Alright, so include the cases covered in the headaches. So please go through all the cases and the example and do lab it out. Okay, so thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy this ISIS video.
Thanks for watching. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel.